So let's go on to the next talk, who is none other than Dr. Rohit Saxena is our next speaker. As you all know, he's a very dynamic, enigmatic, and endearing, leading the Strabismus Pediatric and the Neuro-Ophthalmology Division of the RP Center and holding the position of member ARC for the second term without any opposition. So I call him as Ajata Shatru. So he'll be speaking to us on nystagmus evaluation and management. Over to Dr. Rohit, please.
Thank you, Srinivas, for those very interesting adjectives. I'm audible and screen is visible?
Yes, both.
Okay, thank you. So nystagmus and postgraduates tend to have a very contradictory relationship. They are usually seen heading in opposite directions. So we'll try and see if there's some convergence possible in them. So nystagmus has a very clear definition when you want to call something nystagmus, and it is a rhythmic, involuntary to and fro movement. So to and fro means a complete movement coming back to its original place from where it started, like a pendulum. So this is the real definition of nystagmus, and you can have a lot of other things like saccadic disorders, bobbing, certain other eye movements, sometimes what we call nystagmoid movements, which are eye movement disorders or eye movement issues, but they are not nystagmus. First question is it nystagmus? Then we go on to decide whether this nystagmus is physiological or is it a pathological nystagmus. So physiological nystagmus is usually endpoint nystagmus. We often see at the end of gaze, there may be a nystagmus. Vestibular, optokinetic, which is a physiological nystagmus in all of us, and sometimes some smart kids can come with a voluntary nystagmus. It's present only in extremes of gaze. The primary trajectory is horizontal. It is ill-sustained or does not last for more than a few beats. It's low amplitude, it's symmetric. So both eyes will have a similar amplitude and waveform. And of course, the key point is that there is no other pathological neuro-ophthalmological sign. Pathological nystagmus is obviously if it does not match or meet the physiological nystagmus criteria, and multiple issues have been associated. But commonly we see nystagmus in conditions where there is very early onset visual loss, like optic nerve hypoplasias, retinal dystrophies, LCA, and severe anterior segment pathologies, vestibular dysfunction, and of course a neural integrator dysfunction, which is coordinating between the visual input and the output to control the eye and fix it where it's seen. So after we've understood that it is pathological nystagmus, the next question I need to answer is, I hope it's not an acquired form of nystagmus. That's something that is really worrisome. It usually will present much later than 6 months, which is congenital or infantile nystagmus. The vision is usually good. The patients will almost always present with oscillopsia. In congenital or infantile nystagmus, they usually may occasionally say that the images do tend to move or shake a bit, but really they are not so severely affected by the oscillopsia that it becomes really a problem as far as doing routine activity is concerned. There will be no null zone in acquired nystagmus. There will be no latent component in acquired nystagmus. And of course, you will have a host of other neurological problems that may sometimes help you to localize the lesion. So you know that, I mean, acquired nystagmus, of course, needs to go to neurology and neurosurgery evaluation and management. So we're looking at essentially congenital or early onset childhood nystagmus, where although it's no more considered a classification of sensory or motor, but from an ophthalmologist point of view, it does help us to understand that sensory nystagmus is associated with poor vision, which is primarily the cause for the presentation of nystagmus. There is usually no head posture because nothing can really improve the vision significantly, and we try to manage by providing good refractive correction, low vision aids, and if possible, remove the underlying pathology like managing congenital cataracts, corneal opacities, etc. For motor nystagmus, usually the vision is fairly okay. They may have a head posture which can help them to improve the vision. And of course, it will decrease in intensity with head postures and with convergence. There are three major types which we frequently come across as infantile nystagmus syndrome, which was earlier the congenital nystagmus, diffusion maldevelopment syndrome, which was earlier the latent manifest nystagmus, and of course the spasmus nutans, which fortunately is not frequently seen, but is an important thing to identify. Infantile nystagmus is usually binocular, uniplanar, no oscillopsia, abolished in sleep, and the key point is it is dampened by convergence, something which we'll see how we used to improve it. This is a patient of a latent manifest nystagmus, where you can see that there was no nystagmus to start with or very little. The moment we cover one eye, the other eye is showing increase in nystagmus, and the key thing is that the fast beat or the direction of nystagmus is towards the open eye or towards the fixing eye. So the fast phase towards the fixing eye is a characteristic of the latent manifest nystagmus. And the other important thing to know is there is no need to neuroimage such patients. These are because of fixation binocular problems and binocular problems of binocular development. Spasmus nutans is rarely seen, but can present in less than 6 months of age when we need to rule out a space-occupying lesion. It will present with nystagmus, head nodding, head turn, and the nystagmus may be different in different eyes. So it is asymmetric, and therefore it is important to image in very small children because they are associated with chiasmal gliomas. If it is not, then you just follow up the patient. When will you neuroimage? All cases of acquired nystagmus, periodic alternating nystagmus, seesaw nystagmus, spasmus nutans, and in fact, any nystagmus with poor vision where we are not with disc pallor or we are not able to understand or identify the cause of subnormal vision. So that becomes my indication of doing a neuroimaging. When you're measuring, it's not normal to just see a torch or give a simple task. You need to give them a visually demanding task. Like this patient does not have a head posture to start with, but as she's reading down the Snellens, you can see her head posture developing. And finally, this is the real head posture and not the one she came to us with. This is a severe head posture. So give a visually demanding task. While video nystagmography and electronystagmography can help you occasionally, but we tend to rarely need it in routine clinical situations. So this is kind of the squiggly lines that a VNG or an ENG will give. You can see that straight gaze, there is a lot of squiggly lines. This is significant nystagmus. When the patient looks to the left, gaze left, you can see these are now more spread out. And this is the position of the null where the patient can see best. And this can be used to shift this position to primary position so that the patient is happier. Our aims of treatment is to stabilize the eye, to improve the visual acuity, to decrease oscillopsia, and shift the null to the primary position. We have a lot of non-surgical options, and nystagmus does not just mean that we have poor outcomes. Optical correction is the single most powerful therapeutic intervention we can give. We need to improve the vision and provide the best corrected vision to these children. And some steps are retinoscopy should be done in the null position so that you get accurate refraction. Don't occlude the other eye when you're doing vision. You put a fog, a Spielmann's occluder or a high plus lens so that the light goes in, but the form vision does not. So you are able to measure the vision without
60 seconds, please.
Unmasking the latent component. Over-minus lenses can be used to stimulate accommodation. Amblyopia therapy is extremely important. It can suppress the latent component once the vision becomes normal. And earlier we used to think that occlusion is contraindicated, but we've seen that despite initial increase in the amount of nystagmus, over time as the vision improves, the nystagmus gets better. Prisms have been used to give base out prisms to stimulate convergence, and that can be measured and planned for surgical intervention. We have contact lenses showing improvement, auditory biofeedback, and in fact, a very interesting thesis that was done in our center under Dr. Pradeep Sharma was acupuncture, and we found some very interesting results that during the needle was inside the sternocleidomastoid with some good results, but after removal, it went back to normal. Botulinum toxin is being given, but it is transient. We have done a study on brinzolamide, and we found good improvement in patients who did not have a face turn, but for patients with face turn, obviously the face turn surgery is better. Surgery we can do to cause adduction of convergence, like we use prisms. We can do a null position shifting and reduce the amplitude of nystagmus. For a shift of the correction of the face turn or null position, a lot of surgeries are described, including Kastenbaum's, Anderson's. We at our center prefer to use the augmented or enhanced Anderson's procedure. We do a medial rectus recession of 9 mm in the eye in the direction of the face turn and the other eye with the lateral rectus recession. This shifts the null to the primary position. The advantage is that there are few side effects. You're only doing a recession, so you can reverse it. And if by chance you operate a pan or if there is a residual, you still have two horizontal recti available to correct that. Like this was a case, you can see that this was his original face turn, and after the surgery, this is the VNG picture. This is the nystagmogram in the primary case, and you can see after shifting of the null. This was the null in levo version, which has been shifted to primary position. We can decrease the amplitude of nystagmus, although it is not a very successful surgery. You can do supramaximal recessions, all four recti, or the Hertel-Veloso procedure. In the supramaximal, we do both horizontal recti recessed to 12 mm and the medial recti to 9 mm. This places them retroequatorially and reduces the amplitude of the nystagmus, thereby improving the vision. But again, this is not a very successful surgery, and over time, there is a regression. Although it is important that initially patients have reported good satisfaction. The long-term risk of consecutive exotropia is also there. And lastly, there is the alternative of the Hertel-Deloso procedure, which is tenotomy, cautery the edges and reattach it. In our study, which we had compared the two procedures, that is Hertel-Deloso with all 4 recti recessions, we did not find a difference between the two groups. So you could actually choose what you prefer after discussing with the patient. So there are a lot of options in nystagmus, and it's important to work up step by step and manage to the best of your ability. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rohit. That was a wonderful talk. So packed with information in every slide. I would look to the seniors, Dr. Pradeep Sharma, Dr. Surendran, to ask some questions. We don't spare Rohit. He'll come up with
I have a question for Dr. Rohit.
Yeah.
What is the role of brinzolamide drops in managing nystagmus?
So as I had mentioned, we have done a study in brinzolamide, and it has been reported to act by the receptors at the nerve endings of the muscles. And it has shown, in our study, it had shown a good improvement. At least patient satisfaction was significant after the use of brinzolamide drops. It was a crossover trial, so it was a fairly effective study in patients without face turn. But those with face turn, obviously the face turn surgery is better. So it is an option in these patients where really at the moment there is not much we can offer.
Sure. And my question to Dr. Pradeep Sharma, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, how would you manage a mixed head posture, sir? Like suppose only horizontal, it will be a little easier to manage. Suppose a patient has horizontal, vertical, or torsional head postures. So what will be your approach to such a patient, sir?
So first of all, you will have to see of all the 3 head postures that he's having components, which is the primary or most maximal head posture is in which direction. So if he has, for example, mainly a horizontal head posture and a slight vertical head posture, we would just manage the horizontal part. And many a times the vertical head posture also falls in line. But if it's primarily a chin up or chin down, then we would go for the vertical muscle surgeries to correct that. If it is primarily a head tilt rather than a horizontal and vertical, and the other 2 are minor components, then we go by the oblique muscle surgery. So in the same principle as has been mentioned by the augmented Anderson's procedure or a Kestenbaum procedure, we will work on horizontal muscles for a primarily a horizontal head posture, vertical muscles for the vertical head posture, and a torsional head posture will do the oblique muscles.
Sure. And any other tips from your side for the postgraduates to make nystagmus evaluation simpler, sir?
I think it's there. I think they should be, first of all, not having any fear. Yes. And they should be clear that they should give some time to the patient, and when they are observing him, when he's doing a visually attentive task, that nystagmus would be showing up maximally, and then the null position is shown up. So many times they will miss a head posture if that was not given. Secondly, a pan should have to be seen for at least a continuous 3 to 5 minutes observation. Otherwise, you will miss a periodically alternating nystagmus, a pan, which is also important. So I think these 2 tips they can remember. And thirdly, the vision assessment in any case of nystagmus, I think should be remembered that whenever you see a vision assessed in a nystagmus patient, always check it binocularly again. And if you find the binocular vision is improving by 2 lines, then recheck the uniocular vision by using a +4 instead of an occluder over the other eye.
Can I quickly ask a question to Rohit sir? Arun sir?
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to know, in cases of squint and nystagmus, what will be your preference? Say, for example, in squint, you might require one muscle to resect, and in nystagmus, the same muscle you might have to recess. So, how to go ahead in these things?
So again, it depends upon the type of nystagmus and the kind of squint that you have associated. Suppose you have a fixing eye and a non-fixing eye. So the non-fixing eye is squinting. Then you would manage the nystagmus in the fixing eye. So if there is a fixing eye with a head posture, you correct the head posture in the fixing eye, and the squint is operated on the non-fixing eye. So you can measure it by putting a prism in front of the fixing eye, correct the head posture, and then you measure the amount of deviation in the deviating eye, and you operate for that. So nystagmus head posture will get corrected or is decided by the fixing eye. sometimes when we have other kinds of squints like an adduction null, if there is an adduction null, which is usually associated with an infantile esotropia, then you can do bimedial recessions and add a posterior fixation suture. So depending upon the type of nystagmus and the associated strabismus, usually you will add the two surgeries. So add the surgery which is required for nystagmus correction, add it to the surgery which is required for strabismus correction. But the particularly fixing eye, non-fixing eye is something that can always be helpful for us to manage the two conditions simultaneously in one sitting.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rohit and for the lovely discussion. We shall
Can I add a point, madam?
Yes, yes.
Regarding brinzolamide, sir, we can give, would it be right to give a trial for a month? Because I have 3 kids who defer to stop. They don't want to stop brinzolamide because they have better visual acuity after starting brinzolamide. I think all nystagmus patients where you have a doubt, we can give a trial for a month.
In fact, up to 3 months, we have seen patients come back from up to 3 months giving better, and it's definitely subjectively is definitely more. It may be placebo effect, or often the visual acuity improvement is not so much graded in terms of lines, but the perceptual improvement by the patient and his quality of life improvement is definitely more.
Yeah.